theme of the talk. Should we be happy or worried? Probably both. So, we know that predicting the future is difficult. This is an example of how to get it sort of correct, that there would be computers in the future, but they didn't look like this. Your computers, your mobile phones carry a lot of computing capacity, far more than this machine, and they travel with you, which means the ICT is everywhere in a way that was not expected. So we are in the middle of a revolution. ICT occupies more of our lives, and we spend our lives as consumers. We buy things in the shops, we buy services. There is a transaction that involves some recording of data. We are employees. That also involves the recording of data, some exchange of information, which we may wish or not. And as citizens in the political life of the country. And where do we have the technology? Well, it will be in the devices you carry around, in the applications, in how the data are processed and analyzed. And the physical world is, of course, more and more online and connected. So we have the so-called Internet of Things, where you can, at a distance, talk to your refrigerator and get it to order the food automatically. You can deploy all sorts of automated systems. You could imagine having a car that has no driver, that has a computer control system totally. We have many advances in robotics. So we have to ask, even when you are sitting here, who is connected to who? What device is connected to what? Should you be happy about that connection? Or are there connections you would rather not have? Where would we find this applied? Well, the answer is, of course, everywhere. Computer systems, analysis, much used in the world of finance, in the world of manufacturing, in energy, in transport. We will have a little question and answer about transport. And there are particular issues which I set out here in medicine. So we know in the UK we have a National Health Service, and that was partially disabled by a ransomware cyber attack on its information systems. So the medical systems are vulnerable to attack. Patients, of course, the people in the hospital or in the health system, have their personal data as part of that system. That is necessary in order that they can be helped. But you must maintain the trust of those patients. Are you going to use those data correctly? And the data in large scale can be extremely useful for research. Developing new approaches to disease and treatment can be done extremely well with large data sets. But that data, of course, comes from people. And you need to know where does it come from, the so-called provenance of the data, and you must be able to guarantee that while maintaining the status of the private citizen. This I don't expect you to read, but this is the Wikipedia entry for the so-called Wannacry cyber attack, which was a worldwide attack in May of 2017. Many systems were brought down, and it is concluded in the end that the origin of this attack was probably North Korea. If it's unlikely that any of you were big enough and important enough to be of interest to the writers of Wannacry, but if you were attacked, this is what you would see on your computer screen. It would say, well, you have no longer access to your files, but we kind people in Wannacry can help you in this regard. All you need to do is to pay us lots of money, and we will help you, tell you how to pay, etc. So this is clearly unethical behavior, but it's what the attack would look like, and you have a limited time in which to pay. But the payment, they are attempting to make it as easy as possible to get your money. Now, you may not see this slide very well, but this is an art gallery, a museum in the Netherlands. This is a painting by Rembrandt of a group of gentlemen in a guild, and here are the people in the museum admiring the painting. We'll come back to that painting in a second, but we need to think about these questions. You're a consumer of information and communications technology. How aware are we of the balance, the trade-off, the tension between different aspects? One is you want your technology to be easy to use. You want your life to continue to be private. You want the information to be secure, and you want the relationship, whatever that is, to be one of trust. You can believe what the other side says. But it comes back to a question of when you are looking at the computer screen or your smartphone, is there something looking back at you? So it strikes me that if you look at this slide, you will see that the people in the painting are just as interested in these people as these people are interested in these people. The painting seems to be looking at the real people. So we could reasonably ask in this situation, who is looking at who? Now, of course, when you look at the painting from the 17th century, you don't expect that there's any action on the other side observing you. But of course, that would absolutely be the case in your computer system, that everything you do is in some way being monitored. And this has led to some negative reaction, a backlash. The mainstream media cover this, so people are concerned about their personal data. They're concerned about all the interactions on social media. They are concerned that there are a few big technology companies that have an unhealthy dominance in the market. We could do with more competing companies. That would be a healthier situation. And of course, you have artificial intelligence making decisions, if you like. And who is responsible for those decisions? Who wrote the algorithms that lie behind the decisions? Questions to ask. And those questions relate not only to the hardware and technical issues, but to many other issues as well. So Mozilla has a rather active approach to saying we should have a better quality internet. And it's worth looking at what they say here. They say, of course, the internet is a powerful communication and collaboration resource. It embodies some of our deepest hopes, even we could say for human progress, and certainly provides new opportunities, learning, shared humanity, solving pressing problems. But there are issues. Over the last decade, the promise is seen, but we also see that the power of the internet can be used in other ways. It can divide people, it can make the problems bigger, incite violence, hatred, and this can be done entirely with deliberation. So intentionally manipulating fact and reality. And so we need to be clearer what we really want the internet to do for us. And they set out some principles for Mozilla. The internet should include all the peoples of the world, wherever they are. It should be equal in its access to these opportunities and the quality of experience. Says we should be committed to an internet that promotes civil discourse. We talk to each other in a civilized way. We exchange ideas. We should maintain human dignity and individual expression. We should think about problems critically, so we should elevate critical thinking, have arguments based on reason. We should share our knowledge and we should be clear about our facts and try to verify them. So they are overall committed to an internet that promotes, catalyzes collaboration among different peoples and communities and working for the common good. So this is all very noble objectives. Are they realizable? You can read online about some of the things Mozilla does. Here they're looking in Kazakhstan at getting better security and privacy for the individuals engaging with these ICT systems. Now, I like this picture. It's a real picture from the Arctic where the wildlife photographer sets up the cameras and then goes away to do something. I don't know, have a meal, go to the toilet or something, and then comes back and finds that actually the camera is being used by somebody else. So the moral of our story is when we provide a new technological capability, who will use it? And it may not only be the people who originally intended to use it. Mozilla thinks also about this, and it has money going out. So here they asked for research proposals to get research grants, money to do research. And they received 115 applications. And from the 115, they decided to give money to 8. So obviously quite competitive. This is the list of things they funded. We do not need to worry about the details, but we can note that this includes things like looking at how government gets its information out. Is that properly regulated? How do you manage privacy and security on the web? And in the middle of all of this is this line, which involves supporting something at the University of Cambridge, and that I will talk a little bit about later. In fact, most of this talk is based on the activities of this Cambridge initiative, which has as one of its aspects this project funded by Mozilla. So we should think as our first topic, to have some question and answer, some discussion, transport. So here's a nighttime road scene. You are probably finding that picture quite difficult to understand. What's really going on there? Are we having cars moving through at speed, and what you see are the red lines of tail lights and the white lines of headlights? What are the key obstacles for a vehicle in that situation? This would probably be a nightmare for somebody trying to design a system for a driverless vehicle to get through. And they're all usually tested in altogether simpler situations. So here you have probably California road, nice weather, and here is our autonomous vehicles. These, of course, are just different names given to this concept. So nobody at the steering wheel in this car. Well, here's some news items from this year. So Elon Musk, boss of Tesla, says 1 year from now we will have over 1 million cars with full self-driving capability, the software, everything. The British government says self-driving cars will be on our roads by 2021. And yet a major industry magazine did a survey of 54 experts this year, and the experts concluded that today's prototype vehicles are at least 10 years away from mass deployment. In other words, it would be 10 years before you see any significant things on your roads. So we can ask, will we see these soon? And what are the issues? What are the technical issues associated with this? And what are the ethical issues associated with this? And since you are in the College of IT and Automated Systems, you probably know more about these questions than I do. So this will be a point to throw these questions out to you. Any questions you would want to ask on this, and any points you would like to make? For example, a first question would be, the first one is, Have you seen any of these vehicles? Do you expect to see some soon on your roads in Moscow? Do you have opinions about this? So I believe there are traveling microphones that can allow you to make your question public, and then it will be translated. So of course you can ask your question in English if you wish, but if you ask it in Russian, it will be translated. So I will put on my machine now to hear any translation that's needed. So you don't have to have a question, you could just have a comment on this point. We have a number of hands waiting for microphones to arrive. Do we have? Well, I can give you my microphone for this one. That will work.
So I actually saw a number of autonomous cars at Skokovo.
Yeah.
It's near Moscow. So they really just doing mass tests of the autonomous cars. I think there not so much technical issues for now, but I think most of them are ethical and issues about laws about autonomous cars.
So what can you say more about those other issues?
So probably the main issue is responsibility. If something will happen, who will be responsible for that? So other issues is about, I mean, the new technical, but just I think in laws, because for now laws are not allowing autonomous cars in Russia, but they say they will be made.
So thank you. I think those are good points, and we will get back to those. So there was another hand up here. Right. Two hands. Right. Should I climb up here with a microphone? Or do we have... There we go.
As technology is becoming more and more superior in the recent years, do you think that those experts that say that the autonomous cars will drive our roads like in 10 years or so, do you think they just fear of the unknown that, for example, those cars can, like in the film Terminator, rise up or do something terrible to other people?
So I will take the microphone. So actually that's a very interesting point, and in truth that is not a point which I had in mind. That's probably more a nice story for the popular newspapers to be worried about the cars taking over, something like that. But there are more, shall I say, down-to-earth worries about what we were hearing earlier about what will happen in an accident, who is responsible. And then the experts seem to be particularly concerned on a technical level that you can get rather a good control system with enough computing power. But strangely, even today, it's quite difficult to get enough computing power and sensors at the scale of millions of cars going around. And in particular, you just have a worry that in order to make it work car by car, each car would have to be very expensive. It would just need a very high computing power in it. And they seem to think it will take several years before that one can be solved. And maybe that's really a matter of making everybody feel happy that the reliability of the driving is high enough. You don't hit a tree at the side of the road or something. But we can discuss more. Right, we had another hand over here. Yeah.
My question is a bit similar to the question before. We all know that the automatic vehicles are just working on the neural networks. And the question is, shall we trust our lives to these systems? Because we all know that this is just mathematical functions and they can make mistakes.
Good point. So, why don't we go straight to you?
Yeah, my ask is, okay, we have a car, and as I understand, you want to exclude driver from driving. And what kind of drivers will be? It will be like robots or something robotic, or some kind of networks, like neural networks, and for what percent it will be more safety than like a typical driver, like a human?
So I would comment that, of course, we know that humans are not perfect drivers for all sorts of reasons. So you could imagine that the machine is capable of driving the car more successfully than the human. But the humans have quite a good visual processing system. So if I go back to our earlier picture, the human will probably adapt to this more easily than the machine. And people have been trying to demonstrate that the machines really have problems, showing that you can put signs on the road that will mislead the driving machine rather easily. And you have to think of more and more sophisticated image processing to cope with that. I think we also have the questions that have come up around avoidance of accidents. And this, I think, is one to think about for our human behavior. Imagine you are driving a car on the road, you are driving, and the other vehicles are autonomous vehicles. Does that actually give you the freedom to do anything you want? Because you could just drive straight at the autonomous vehicle, and it is presumably programmed to get out of your way. So does that give rise to bad human driving behavior? Or you can be confident you will have no accident, because these poor machines have to do anything to make it possible to avoid an accident. This has been debated in the newspapers. As to whether the autonomous vehicle will allow you to drive, probably it will, and you would switch in and out as a driver. So you would like to go on a long journey by the car, you program in the coordinates of your destination, and you then decide you will relax and you will do your emails or you will watch some movie, and the car takes you there without you having to think in relation to, it would be similar to taking a train journey. But if the car gets a problem in the automatic system, it might like to switch back to the human driver, but we have to realize that will certainly not work, because when a problem arises, it has to be solved quickly, and the human driver who's concentrating on the movie or the email will not be able to be brought to concentrate on the driving fast enough and react fast enough to do anything useful. So we really need to be concerned about that, I think. Now, we were hearing about concerns and laws. So when the driverless car does have an accident and kill somebody, who is responsible?
Developers.
The
Developers.
Yeah, of, you mean the algorithm writer, or did you want to say anything more about that?
I wanted to say
I want to say is that the developers of vehicles are.
Yes?
I say that in Russian.
Yeah.
Я хочу сказать, что виноваты будут только разработчики этого автомобиля, а не водители, если что-то случится.
So imagine you are the developer. and somebody gets killed, will you be happy to go to jail, and will you feel responsible?
I want to say something. Я думаю, что я не буду разработчиком этой машины, поэтому со мной ничего не будет.
So that's a good practical answer to choose something else to do, yes. But clearly there are real issues here, right? So difficult.
I think one more is probably a social issue because in Russia currently we have around 1 million taxi drivers.
Yes.
So actually that's not really qualified people to do anything else. And then self-driving cars will be on the market. I think the first companies that we provide is Yandex Taxi and any taxi organization. So about 1 million of people will be unemployed and probably will be very angry on self-driving cars.
Thank you for that point. Does anybody has a, or maybe you have a different point or a reaction to that, but either way, I will give you the microphone. So.
Come back to your question about systems. I suppose that developers are hard enough to make the system turn some sound signals
Yep.
before stopping, or just stop at the road. So I think that it won't be an issue. Did I understand you?
I understand you, but think maybe these things are not so easy.
Okay.
So I was commenting in reply that maybe these things are not so easy. We have rather complex situations to analyze rather quickly. And when we view an evolving situation on the road, we do so with a lifetime of experience of interpreting moving images. But you could also realize that much as bad things are happening on the internet because people are trying to do bad things, that could also be true in this driving situation. So we could imagine we were hearing about the taxi company buying driverless cars. So maybe one taxi company will get malware into the system of another taxi company to make their cars do bad things. So they will drive them out of business. Or maybe one of these 1 million out of work people will think they have to destroy the autonomous car industry by getting some malware into the system and making the system not work as it should. New opportunities for attack, I think, also. Yeah, we have a hand up there, yes. Oh, you have one A. Okay, good. Who's over there? Yeah, I think, yeah. Well done. Yeah. Hello.
Question about difficulty of city driving.
Yeah.
I think it's probably more easier to make first self-driving city cars. There's all is known. And I think good experience will be with self-driving subways because it's more easier. It has rails when it goes, and it's
Yeah.
It's off-road driving because not each person can drive country roads. I think we can make these steps step by step.
I think you make a very good point. I would say these driverless subway systems already exist.
Not every city and big cities.
Yeah.
Megapolis have it. And Moscow does not have this. I have a friend in subway, and we have conversation about this. He says it's possible because we need more technical workers in subway to keep subway working.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely correct. It is unusual to have a driverless subway, but they do exist, or at least driverless transport systems do exist in some places. So in London, for example, the Underground has drivers, but it has one line, the so-called Docklands Light Railway, one line out of many lines, which operates without a driver. But that is on an elevated track and not in a tunnel. There are big issues. So I agree with you. We have a range of difficulty. I think you could imagine that driverless vehicles could be useful for agriculture. You have some large field harvesting a crop. You don't really need a person driving that machine. You could program the pattern across the field. You could also imagine driverless vehicles for long distance truck transport, I think, but on good quality roads, of course, not off-road, as you say. Off-road would indeed be difficult, but presumably off-road is of considerable interest to the military. And then in the city you have a very well connected system, but you might want every car to talk to every other car in navigating that, so quite complex.
One addition. In city, self-driving program can be working together with a city program of traffic lights.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and indeed you could program it to have a traffic management system. So when you have a traffic jam in one place, it coordinates things to spread the transport more evenly. And people are, of course, working on all sorts of models for that. So we had the question of the social impact, that if we have driverless taxis, and indeed other driverless vehicles, many people will be out of work. Does anybody have any comment on that? Do you think that's a problem or an opportunity? Well, we have a hand up here and a microphone is making its way. Good.
I think that it's not a problem because it's 21st. We have 20 and 90 years, and it's not a problem right now because a lot of people lost their work, lost two years ago, lost right now, lost 10 years ago. It's not a problem. It's very good unit. So change your work if you can do it right now. You can be IT, you can input in IT if you can't work like, I don't know, like engineer.
Yeah.
And that's my opinion.
Okay, that's the engineer's view. Right, we have a hand down here, so the microphone might make its way downwards.
Я скажу на русском, мне кажется, это большая проблема, потому что повысится безработица, будет кризис, и для экономики страны, которая будет достаточно проблемно это решить. Куда отправить этих людей, что с ними делать? Для любой страны будет проблема, особенно еще не развивающихся стран, как наша. И для
Well, I think you say less a problem for Great Britain than Russia, but actually it would be a similar issue everywhere, I think. And we have another view, please.
Well, the question about the connection between the traffic light system and
Yeah.
the automatic car system. So if they will work together, one proper mistake could lead to a lot of victims. Yeah, and what can we do with this? What opportunities we have to solve this conflict, these problems, to minimize the victims?
I think it's a good question, and the answer has to be that you have taken the first important step of realizing that it is a problem and that you shouldn't implement any of these systems without very careful testing on a small scale first, building confidence and trust in the system. So it's a one step at a time approach, I think.
But involving one system to another will lead to big complexity of the whole system, and will it be safer because they work together or not because they are not because they work together? Yeah. So.
It will, of course, be both, right? If you get it right, it will be safer, and if you get it wrong, it'll be very, very bad. And we already see this in financial systems, where systems are linked in what seems like a clever way until there is some perturbation in the system that was not foreseen, and then it may crash. So the problem with the connected system, you're completely right, the problem spreads faster because it is connected and sophisticated.
And how do you think all the systems, not just about cars or something like this, also economic systems, medicine systems, and other, should they be separated all, or should they all work together? So what should be better?
There is, of course, no right answer. There are advantages in both, and my best hope is that clever people will solve this problem, and my best hope is that I'm looking at some of these clever people right now, since you are entering the right domain to be dealing with some of these questions, with assistance from other subjects, which will be a little theme of what I will go on to say. Can I bring this little discussion to a close, maybe, with, we have another hand, which we'll get to you in a second. On the social question, I think the point that it's not a problem and the point that it is a problem are, in a funny way, both completely correct. And of course, it's a matter of history that at every point of the Industrial Revolution, there was the same argument. That when you take away the small home industries for spinning wool and you make it into big mills, industrial mills, people lose their jobs. But the big industrial mills are, of course, more efficient, and you have a general rise in prosperity. So you have a transient problem for the people who lose their jobs, and that's a serious problem, but you feel that probably society operates better now because of the greater productive capacity in industrialization, and it's just the same issue. It does, however, I would say, become a worry when you really have no jobs left for the unskilled people. And I'm not sure how we deal with that. However, we had a hand at the back. Yeah.
Hello.
Yep.
I would like to add something more about employment problem. I'm absolutely don't agree with the opinion that it is not a problem. Well, I suppose that depends only from the category of people. When we talk about young people who are very optimistic to life and have different options where they can work, of course, it is not a problem. But when we talk about elder people, and as I have mentioned through the years that I live in Moscow, a lot of taxi drivers, they are more than 45 or 50 years, and if they lose their work, they lose everything because they have families, children, and it's not a problem, I suppose. It's a disaster. It's a real disaster because they have their own car, for example, work in a Yandex taxi company and have some salary. And in one day they know that now there are more smart cars and self-drive cars. They leave their work and it's very hard, I suppose, at the age more than 50 or 60 to find a new job. What do you think about that and how we can solve this problem? Which solutions do you see in the case of other people? Which problem that self-drive cars can cause for this category? Thank you.
So thank you for your question. I, of course, have no answer to offer. I think it's important that we recognize the problems, and actually it becomes quite a serious, if you wish, society and political question, how to handle these. On a smaller scale, we could think that years ago, telephones operated only with landlines, and you had a telephone exchange with somebody working to put a plug in a hole to connect one phone to another. Those people no longer exist because we have an automated system. So I think we have to agree that you should be worried about the problem. We must also agree that that worry shouldn't stop you making some progress towards a better system. The problem is, how do you make the transition? And that will be helping those people out in some other way, I think. So I'll come back to the earlier point on how do you choose? Do you choose to have the traffic violation, or do you choose to injure people, and so on? This could be a much bigger discussion with many options. And if you go on the internet, you will find some results of surveys where people have been set a problem. Imagine you had to program the system for a driverless car, and you set a problem that the car meets. How would it solve this problem? Would it crash into another vehicle or something by the side of the road? Would it choose, to be blunt, to kill an older person instead of a younger person? Would you program that in if it had to choose? These are, of course, difficult, you might say impossible choices, but in the end, I suppose the developer has to think about these issues, and it becomes extremely problematic from a legal perspective. If there is an accident, somebody goes to court. Who is on the other side of the case? Is it the person who made a faulty camera on the car so that the computer didn't get a high quality image? Is it the developer of the program to interpret the image? Where does the fault lie? And this is going to be extremely difficult, I think. So, okay, we've had a little debate. I should maybe move on to some more slides and we can have another debate. So, let's think of, we've done autonomous vehicles. Let's just say this is what the areas of concern are identified to be, that the control systems at this point are simply not reliable. The point we have just been discussing is if there's a safety issue or an accident, who is responsible? Even for the road transport situation, there are cyber threats. You might decide that you don't like your neighbor and you'd like to kill him. Maybe the most convenient way to do that would be to program something bad to happen with his driverless car. So it would just turn off and drive into the Moskva River. At this point, it's believed they could be quite high cost. This will be an issue even for the taxi companies at some point, of course. And then I mentioned earlier the behavior of human drivers, that if the autonomous cars are always going to get out of your way, that gives you a lot of freedom as a human driver. Although you may be watched by somebody else. And the control systems are amazingly still not decided. So there's a system called LiDAR, it involves light sensors. You make a three-dimensional map of the surroundings. This technology exists, it's quite widely used in research. Elon Musk thinks you shouldn't do it. That's a technical solution that only a fool would use. And he is obviously a big name in the industry, and other people in the same industry think this is essential. So for a technology that some are claiming is going to be with us the year after next, this is a lot of uncertainty about how you would really build your system. So let's now look at some news from yesterday. We mentioned the subway, but this is a story about a railway station in London. It has, of course, cameras. London probably has more cameras than any other city in the world, looking at the street. And they are using facial recognition technology without telling anybody they're doing this. The police supplied some images that goes to the database for the technology, although they denied this initially. And already there has been one case in the court challenging this. The case was not the London one, but it was the same question. And almost certainly this London example will now end up in the law courts. So the technology allows faces to be captured on closed circuit television and checked in real time against stored images, often compiled by the police. So unsurprisingly, there are some groups, this is from the BBC website, saying live facial recognition, the surveillance, the looking at people, that must stop. And so I think the questions for you are we, as some people say, in a surveillance crisis? Is this surveillance of the public, is it good or is it bad? So that's a question for you, for comment or discussion. Any people think it's a good thing? Yes?
Я скажу по-русски. Я правильно понял, что вы задавали вопрос про массовую слежку с помощью камер, которые распознают лица, да? Отлично. Я могу сказать свое экспертное мнение, ведь я студент первого курса ИВТ. Вот. Короче, я считаю, что все зависит от того, где эта технология используется. Если эта технология используется в Китае, или у нас в стране, или где-нибудь в Северной Корее, то, наверное, эта технология скорее плоха, чем хороша, потому что у нас ее используют, я думаю, очень как-то странно. Допустим, чтобы кого-нибудь отправить в тюрьму или что-нибудь такое. Это лично мое мнение, никого не призываю. Вот. Если это будет использоваться, скажем, где-нибудь в Европе, или в Америке, в Канаде, в США, я говорю в Америке, в США, вот, то там, я думаю, это будет использоваться как-то более лояльно к людям, потому что, если у нас дубинку на митингах бьют, даже если это, я не знаю, на твой дубину, лишний раз, то в других странах у нас, в других странах это делают, когда там уже плохо все горит и тому подобное. Поэтому я считаю, этот вопрос хороший. Я считаю, что все зависит от конкретно от того, кто использует.
So we have some view there, but what about these people in London? They are just catching a train and they find they are being recorded. Any other views? Do we have our other microphone hiding somewhere to travel across? It's coming down, yes, very good. Yeah.
Very controversial question, but of course, this spy helps people because it maybe has been the crime rate or something like this. It's helped to work of the police, of other services, social. But we should also remember about people's private life. And how can we just find the line when we should spy and when we shouldn't?
Yeah. Good question.
This is the question. Where is the line?
Right, and again, I'm not going to have an answer, but it's good for your, yeah. Yeah. Right, we had other hands up at the back, I think, did we? Yep, we have one more.
I think very short petition. I think we need to use it just for security.
Yeah.
Not for another goals. Not for government goals, like using people just for security.
Mm-hmm. Good, yeah. We have a couple. I can get this microphone to you.
Definition of just security on the stage very much depends on how much you want. I disagree that people in Russia or in America are different. In America, they will do it as San Francisco, for example, has already advanced application definition.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Maybe you were not talking about people, maybe he was talking about the regimes that are using technology, but regimes change environment. The data is already changing. Someone will get some.
Good. Right, the microphone can make its way up to the back. While it is doing that, I will push it here.
So I think I wanted to make note that we already probably have much same system because in Russian metro subway there already was some face recognition system tests, and they got 100 or 200 of criminals, which are they were wanted and just were coming on subway. So I think it should be used by the police, but probably places that are survived by the system and members probably should be properly marked. I think there can be some more use cases. For example, just slogans of how much people probably at the park or at the square, but with anonymized data. Also, probably it can be used as identification. So probably you can just vote right into university subway or many vote, and it will recognize you and it will work like passcode or something like that. So I think the main copy in these cases were can be used and it will be good.
Thank you. Right, we had it.
У меня вопрос не по массовой слежке, меня интересует более финансовая сторона вопроса, так как затраты на производство очень большие, и, соответственно, цена тоже будет очень большая у беспилотных автомобилей. Люди зачастую бывают консервативны, то есть они не захотят, допустим, пользоваться беспилотным автомобилем, а рассуждают так, что до меня все водили ручной автомобиль, и я буду так же. То есть они отпадают, они не будут покупать автомобиль. Люди, которые боятся технологий, такие тоже есть, они тоже не будут покупать автомобиль. Люди, разбирающиеся в технике, которые понимают, что техника априори не может быть совершенной, существуют программные сбои, ошибки, тоже не будут покупать такой автомобиль. Тогда в чем его экономический потенциал? То То есть вы проводили какие-то опросы, спрашивали людей, будут ли они пользоваться такими автомобилями, если проводили опросы, то какой процент согласился?
So that, you make a good point on economics, which suggests at one level we do not need to think too much about this. The market will solve the problem for us. So if you have driverless cars but nobody buys them, then the problem has gone away at some level. We will probably return to this question later, but you're quite correct about serious issues about money, how much does it cost, and about new technology. But actually we live in a world that seems to be adapting to new technology quite a lot. So I think we will see these things, but the time scale not so clear. So thank you for the point. Now coming back to our surveillance question, yes, so you would want to have some safety systems on the metro. You would be worried about private life being intruded on. You would be concerned about security. There's also problems about systematic bias. So it is known, they have analyzed this facial recognition software performance. It systematically performs worse with women. And it's something to do with makeup and fashion, that it has more problems recognizing. It has systematic problems with people of darker skin, so it'll make more mistakes. So we need to worry about those questions. And to give you an example, which is not quite facial recognition, but it's a recognition question, in a system developed in the United States to help the fire service looking into buildings to see were there people inside to rescue. This is a terrible story, but is true. The system simply didn't recognize that black people were people, because when training the system, they had never used any black people. So the computer didn't think that somebody who was black was a person. So you need to be very careful in training your recognition systems, I think. So we should move on, I think. I hope you can see the screen just a little bit. And I will say just what some of the points of view are. So the campaigners are saying, well, the police and companies must stop using this live facial recognition. And they say that the technology is anyway inaccurate, and it certainly infringes on your right to privacy. The people who make the equipment, of course, would like to sell it, and they say it protects the public as it can catch people like terror suspects in the way the police cannot. And the Home Office, the Interior Ministry in the UK, say the technology supports the police as they trial new technologies to protect the public. And these new technologies would include facial recognition, which helps identify and locate suspects and criminals. Certainly, it's clear in London that with all these cameras, if there is some terrorist crime, people can be traced very fast. It may not stop the crime happening, but it means you can catch the people more easily. The next step to facial recognition, I think, remains a bit of an issue. So we need, as we were saying, we had a point on you need to think about what is the regime you're living in. Is this a regime that promotes trust? In technology in general, we need trust, and this is at every single level. The level of the individual, at the level of your company or university. Do you trust Massis to handle your data correctly, or would they sell your data to somebody trying to sell you computers, say, because they know what you're interested in? At the level of society, you need trust. And there are all the aspects that we have covered a little bit of that we are struggling, we in this room are struggling to answer the questions. because the questions have many aspects. They are legal, to do with the law, there are questions of ethics, there are certainly political questions. In the government and public sector, the government is concerned about having acceptance by the public. They may make recommendations for health, for example, but do you trust that they're making good recommendations? Do you trust the nature of the governance, the safety that they would wish to promote? Presumably the government is supporting innovation in society and systems should remain fit for purpose, but maybe they go to other purposes we do not want. In industry, the industry needs to promote trust as well. You need consumers to have confidence in the product, and we were hearing about the prejudice against new technology, for example. So uptake of products is a problem, and of course risk management. So the industry may be able to make a very nice driverless car with better performance, faster on the road, etc. But if it starts killing people, that's not good for the company, so it needs to manage its risk. And we probably don't feel that we are very reassured on many of these questions. So we can see that the technology moves fast, but the law and the ethics are slow by comparison. The society impacts, some of which we have been discussing, out-of-work taxi drivers, etc. These have been inadequately studied. They're not well understood. We have all these safety questions, and we were hearing a problem about things being connected, and is that good or bad? It's of course both, and it relates to this concept of resilience in our infrastructure. When something happens that was not expected, does our infrastructure manage or does it fail? Does it make the problem worse? And autonomous vehicles would be one example of problems here. We've just been discussing the problems of surveillance at scale. If everybody in the city is on camera all the time, what are the issues associated with that? You may have data, but how reliable is it? Can you verify the data? Is the fake news or not? What happens in a society when people are not making decisions, but it's an algorithm? Of course, the algorithm was written by somebody, so somewhere far enough back, somebody was involved, but how do you identify the right person? You have problems of complexity. When the driverless car kills somebody, who is responsible? What's the accountability? We know there are major security breaches, asking for your money, and we hear news stories about interference in election campaigns, etc. So all of these news stories may make us feel a little uncomfortable. So we may ask then, in this difficult situation, what to do. And so I'll say a little bit about this. We clear what we want. The society demands more transparency. We want to know what lies behind these systems. Who is doing these things? We want more agency. In other words, you want to have more control. What can you do to change something? You want more accountability. You want to know who is responsible. How can you hold them to account? So in this question of trust in ICT, we could ask what is happening at a university like Cambridge in relation to this. So I'll first say just a couple of words about the university and then move on to the approach. So first of all, to say it's quite old, it's extremely diverse, 150 departments. This is the number of students, and they come from around the world. And this is another picture of the river with the bridges over it. Of course, being so old, a few well-known people have been there, like Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin, and it tends to collect a lot of Nobel Prizes and things like this. So it's famous for its scientific endeavors, but it has to try to engage with the real world. And the real world is sometimes more complicated and interconnected than you would think. So these two people are physicists, but they're getting a Nobel Prize in medicine for doing crystallography. So we need to think of what we can gain by bridging across disciplines. And in these 150 departments, they're grouped into these broad areas. My point of this slide is to say a university like Cambridge, of course, has a much broader range than the CIS. and in particular in the humanities, social sciences, and the arts, and including medicine. And these are all linked, and the ICT, of course, touches every one of these. Now, the university would like to think that it deals with some of the big challenges of the world, and it identifies some strategic initiatives. So this just lists the current strategic initiatives at Cambridge. Here are the medical ones. They're rather obvious. Everybody in the room would pick solving cancer as a major problem to solve. This is to do with drugs mainly. Then conservation, energy, global challenges, climate change, this sort of thing. Food security related to climate change is clearly a big issue. Big data and sensors relate to some of the things we have just been discussing. How do you bring the digital world into the humanities? Public health policy, and the point of my story is the newest addition to this list of strategic research initiatives is the one called Trust and Technology. And that is the subject that we have been discussing. So this is the website for Trust and Technology. This is what this initiative is trying to do, to explore the dynamics of trust and distrust in relation to internet technologies, society and power, to help you better design a system so it's a trustworthy design to govern the next stage of technology, how you do your research and development, and to promote some informed, critical and engaging voices from people like you, supporting individuals and communities in the case where we're dealing with so many issues associated with technology going all the way through our societies. This is their website. They're looking at things like disinformation, fake news. They're trying to identify research areas that will promote good practice in trust in technology. And they've learned a few things so far. It's only been going since October of last year, this initiative. And they find, maybe it's not true of this audience, but they found in Cambridge that the people who develop the technologies often assume that trust is, you can build trust into your system, and they naturally assume that trust is a good thing. Whereas the psychologists, the social scientists, the political scientists see that as naive. Actually, you shouldn't think that trust is necessarily a good thing. It could be quite useful to be distrustful. Immediate challenges, we've referred to the fake news business. We've referred to resilience of your cyber system and the problem of algorithms running things. The initiative hopes to do things in the university, so they're going to set up a sort of emergency committee that will deal with some cyber crisis or think about how to deal with a crisis when it arrives. There will be a PhD doctoral student training program in trust and technology, and ultimately a research institute in this area. And there are emerging discussions which includes companies and government in how the technology is created and used. We have to look at the issues of politics and economics. We've mentioned them in our discussion. What do you really mean by trust and distrust? And what are the forms of those in the internet age, especially when you have very complex information flows? So if you were in Cambridge today, you would be able to go to this symposium. So it's starting 2 p.m., in other words, 4 p.m. Moscow time. I'm not sure if it's going to be online. Of course, you're not interested in the list of people, but I wanted to show you the list of areas in which they work. Somebody working in artificial intelligence, somebody working in law, in sociology, dealing with media and culture, existential risk. Do we put humanity at risk from these technologies? Here we have new media and digital technology, again, from a sociology perspective. And the local government is very involved in this initiative as well. So my point is, it's not just IT people who need to be involved, but a wide range of other disciplines in thinking about these questions. And there are some resources available online to read about in detail about different aspects. So we know we need better regulation in this area of ICT. You need to get people to behave by providing the right incentives and understanding what is normal behavior, what is correct behavior, and what is not. So what to do? We could set some grand challenges here for building our technology, and we need to think that that challenge is at every level, from the hardware to the models you're using, software, and the interfaces from one side to the other. And ICT experts need to meet the technical challenges, of course, but they also need to educate the wider public in the nature and capabilities of these technologies, and these experts need to play a prominent role in shaping policy, societal norms, how we should behave, and suggesting to government what would be the right directions for regulation. So my question for you is, well, who are these ICT experts? And I have a particular answer prepared to this question, which is, where would we look for these experts? And they might try and run away from the problem, so they could run a bit away or further, or the people who want to be called upon in this area might try to avoid the problem. So you could hide and pretend you don't see the problem, but of course the problem is still there. And my answer to this question of who are these people who should be thinking about these difficult problems is, I'm afraid, an easy one and a difficult one. The answer is, I think, that these people are you. You will be going out and developing these IT areas. You will be carrying the responsibility of answering these questions. And the answers are not easy. So I don't know if anybody wishes to have any debate about whether you're willing to take this. We've already heard from somebody who doesn't want to be a developer of a driverless car because he might end up in jail. So maybe the rest of you might want to avoid problems also. But I think you will have problems in general, and it's your responsibility to society to educate the people around you who are not IT specialists in what is going on in this area, so they understand the issues better. So I will hand it over to you for anybody who wishes to make any other remarks or any other questions. Maybe you have, I see a hand at the back, so if a microphone can make its way up the room from somewhere. Here it is. Okay, good. Off you go. So I think the answer has to be different in different places. I'm sure you will have some countries which would wish to have a demonstration of the new technology, and they might do that within the bounds of a particular city. We see this in other areas of governmental activity with some aspects of social care or medical care. When a new technology is being tried, it is sometimes tried in one region first to see what the problems are, how can we prepare properly. I would suggest this has to be the case with the driverless cars, that you cannot overnight suddenly say, that's easy, we will put them on the roads and everything will be fine. That cannot be true. You must try out solutions to the system piece by piece. And one obvious way to do that is in a localized area. And I suspect that we would first see this in a totally command economy, like, say, China, where you will have a defined city and the Chinese regime will say this will be what happens there. And they have the immediate power to override any concerns of the individuals involved, but it does in fact lead to an immediate need to solve the technological questions, which does push things forward. But you have to be right that by and large, the system is not ready. Any other? Yes, we see another question.
I have one question. How can I become an ICT specialist? I don't know. How can I become? Where I can study? Where can I work? And something like this.
Well, presumably you're making a good start by being here, right? And the way things move forward depends largely on you. And I think you have to, it's quite unusual to have a successful map from the start of how to make your career. There are some people who do it and say, I'll do that and then I'll do that. That's mostly not the way it works. You just have to look for the best opportunities at each stage and keep pushing yourself at each stage. So that's a very general answer, but just be aware of the local opportunities. Any other thoughts? If not, it just remains to me to thank you very much for all of your participation. So, thank you.
Thank you.